Microsoft made Bill Gates the world's richest man by putting its operating system in every personal computer, and then by trying to ensure there was a PC in just about every home, certainly in the developed world. Then came the internet, smartphones, the world of apps, and Microsoft seemed to many lost. So what to do with a massive company that needed a new direction? That was the challenge before Satya Nadella when he took over the company in February of 2014. I'd say he's done pretty well. The stock hit its highest ever price just last month, nearly doubling the company's worth to over $500 billion. Nadella, a soft-spoken engineer and an Indian immigrant, faced the uphill battle of changing a company that was still under Bill Gates's enormous shadow. So what did he do? He hit refresh. That is also the name of his terrific new book. Satya Nadella, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, Fareed.
You say that qualities like empathy, concern, mindfulness are going to be at the heart of Microsoft winning the next wave of technology battles and kind of becoming or maintaining its role as a technology giant. It's a strange thing for the CEO of a technology company to do. So I want to start by having you explain personally how you got to this point of understanding it. And tell me about your mother, who was not a technology person, not an engineer, not even an economist like your dad was, but she was a scholar of Sanskrit and had a very different outlook on life than one thinks of when one thinks of the Indian driving, achievement-oriented parent.
I have learned the power of empathy. It is not some innate capability that I had, but it was life's experiences, whether it was my mother, quite frankly, now I see it more clearly, her influence, or the birth of my son. In the case of my mother, my dad was this, as you said, he was an economist who was in love with ideas.
Ironically, a Marxist economist.
A Marxist economist. And he would be always loved with ideas. He had intellectual curiosity and ambition. My mom, who herself was an academic, was more about stay calm, absorb what is happening, be mindful. In fact, she would always ask me, are you happy? And it was not a banal question. It was like, are you truly able to take it all in? And quite honestly, when growing up, sometimes I would even get irritated. And only now I realize, as I grow each year, that the lessons she tried to teach me throughout are the more enduring ones. And so her influence has been tremendous.
I mean, it's an important point, again, from an immigrant background, because I think of my father, who was a very driven, self-made man. I think if you had asked him, are you happy, he wouldn't have understood the question.
Right.
The point of life was not personal happiness, the point was achievement, success, right?
That's right. And sometimes that's how I interpreted it. Like, how can I be happy? I have to be impatient. I have to go on to the next thing. Her thing, I think, was to remind me that you don't do your best work if you're waiting for your next thing. You've got to do your work today and enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it or have meaning, which came much later, in fact, from another very interesting source, Doug Burgum, who's the governor of North Dakota now, once looked at me and said at work, saying, you are going to spend more time at Microsoft than with your children. And so you better figure out a way for this work to have more meaning. That was one of those other moments I was perhaps in my mid-30s, and I realized, what is he saying? But it struck me as the most best advice that I've gotten.
You had another occasion to be shocked into finding empathy with the birth of your son. Explain what happened.
I was 29 years old. Anu and I were only children of our parents, and so this was our first son, and we were all very excited, the entire family was. And even a few hours before Zain was born, we were mostly concerned about, is the nursery going to be ready, or how is Anu going to go back to her job as an architect? And those were our concerns. And then, of course, life changed that night. And the first...
And he's born. Explain what happened.
There was in utero asphyxiation, and he was born with severe cerebral palsy, and he's quadriplegic today. He's 21 years old. The first couple of years, Fareed, I must say, I struggled. I struggled mostly because I felt something happened to my plan, my ideal. A lot of questioning, why me, why us? Whereas Anu, right off the bat, was all about driving Zain from therapy to therapy and making sure he got the best shot, the best chance. And without schooling me in particular, I got schooled because I saw her and her approach, and then I realized that nothing happened to me. Zain was the one suffering, and it was my responsibility as a father to see that through his eyes and do the best I can. And that, I think, when I look back, was probably one of those moments of hit refresh that really helped shape who I am at work even. And it's not that, that was the only incident, but I think that's where I'm now a firm believer that your life's experience is what's going to help you develop increasing levels of empathy for more people. And that's what's going to make you a good leader, a good colleague, and a good innovator.
I'll be back in just a moment with much more of my interview with Satya Nadella. With more of my interview with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, the author of a new book, Hit Refresh. So you have transformed Microsoft, and the conventional wisdom would be you took a company, an extraordinary technology giant, but that was foundering, had lost its way, had missed the web, had missed a lot of the mobile, things like that. Did you have to incentivize compensation? Did you have to give a lot of speeches? How did you actually how do you turn a ship around?
I think, it's all the levers, right? I mean, leadership is one of those things where there's multiple things that you've got to do and get them right and continuously cultivate. One of the first things I worked very hard on is when I joined the company in 1992, we used to talk about our mission as to put a PC in every home and every desk. It was clear, right? It was so tangible. And by even the end of that decade, at least in the developed world, we more or less achieved that objective. And then, we said, what next? So that's when I said, okay, we've got to go back and have a sense of purpose and mission as a company. Because in order for us, we can't be looking with envy to what the competitor is doing for inspiration. We have to truly say, what is it that Microsoft can uniquely contribute in a competitive marketplace? And so I went all the way back to the first product of the company, which was Paul and Bill creating the basic interpreter for the Altair. And right there in the story of our birth is who we are at our core, which is we create technology so that others can create more technology. We're a tool maker, a platform provider. That's who Microsoft is. We're not a consumer internet company, but we are a platform company and a tool maker. And so I've said, okay, let's now capture that in words, which is, we talk about our mission is empowering people and organizations all over the planet to achieve more. And each one of those words is key to us.
If there's so much data out there and so much computing power that can analyze it, there are some dangers, right? I mean, we've seen it in the last election, the ability to collect data which tells you how people are leaning in terms of their votes, what they might be influenced by, how you could suppress their vote, how you could encourage their vote. Obviously, this is done with retail customers all the time in terms of what choices are provided to them in terms of what they buy and sell. I can think of ways you could manipulate the stock market by putting fake news in front of people that causes a stock to move down, and then somebody's profiting off that. This seems to me a brave new world.
It is a brave new world, and I think, as I've always thought about this, is the key for us is let us, like with any new technology, is when the telegraph came, wire fraud, and we had to deal with it. So the question is, how do we take the good? To give you an example, AI is one of the big benefits one gets if you have data. Your ability to reason over data gives you artificial intelligence. To put it in tangible terms, in fact, one of the colleagues of mine whom I worked with when I first joined the company, was still there, Angela Mills, was recounting this story. We launched a new app called Seeing AI, which is available on the App Store. What it does is it takes some of the cutting edge work from computer vision, makes it available for someone with visual impairment to be able to see. And Angela has visual impairment. So for the first time, she was telling me she can go into our cafeteria, read the menu, order the right food, walk into the right conference room knowing that it's the place where her meeting is, fully participate in some sense at Microsoft because of AI. Same thing happened when we put learning tools into Word. People with dyslexia now can start to improve their reading because of the assistance of AI. So I believe we should first grab onto all of these opportunities to enhance the human experience with AI, while being very clear-eyed about all of the implications, whether it's automation that leads to jobs displacement, whether it's cyber threats. And these are all going to require not only companies like ours doing it their best work, taking a principled stance in terms of how we design things, and ultimately even governments and the legislative process looking at how do we make sure that with the unintended consequences of new technology are not causing us harm.
A final question. When you think about AI, supercomputing, all these extraordinary technologies, I think now people at the back of their minds think, this all sounds great, but what will I do? What do you say to people who look at AI and, you know, the driverless car and say,
right,
yeah, but 3 million Americans, mostly without college degrees, drive a car, bus, or truck for a living, and this wonderful technology might be great for the economy in some abstract sense, but it's going to put 3 million people out of work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a real issue. So here's multiple things. One is on the practical side, I would say, let's not fall complete victim to this lump of labor fallacy.
Lump of labor fallacy being, what you're saying is there's actually lots of new work and new jobs and new industries that will spring up.
That's right, that's one. So then, that's, having said it abstractly, then let's even go to work on, in fact, disproving the lump of labor fallacy, which is to say, people on people jobs. Can we have an economy where there's a lot of surplus being created by automation, create, in fact, great wage support for people on people jobs? In fact, one of the things
like what? Give me an example.
Elder care. And in fact, in my own case, if I look at, I would say, what are all the services that could be available for some children with disabilities that not just someone like me can afford, but broadly can be afforded? So I think that there is a role. In fact, in a world where there is a lot of artificial intelligence, what's going to be scarce is real intelligence or human intelligence, the innate qualities we have. How do we create markets for them? I think would be one of the more interesting challenges in the future.
So in a sense, the challenge is for human beings to figure out how to be more human.
That's correct. That's correct.
Satya Nadella, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much, Fareed.
Satya Nadella, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, Fareed.
You say that qualities like empathy, concern, mindfulness are going to be at the heart of Microsoft winning. Microsoft made Bill Gates the world's richest man by putting its operating system in every personal computer, and then by trying to ensure there was a PC in just about every home, certainly in the developed world. Then uphill battle of changing a company that was still under Bill Gates's enormous shadow. So what did he do? He hit refresh. That is also the name of his terrific new book. 2014. I'd say he's done pretty well. The stock hit its highest ever price just last month, nearly doubling the company's worth to over $500 billion. Nadella, a soft-spoken engineer and an Indian immigrant, came the internet, smartphones, the world of apps, and Microsoft seemed to many lost. So what to do with a massive company that needed a new direction? That was the challenge before Satya Nadella when he took over the company in February